Iberian Peninsula.
The Iberian Peninsula, commonly called Iberia, is the second largest European peninsula. It is located in the extreme southwest of the continent. The area is approximately 582,000 kilometers (2). There are 3 countries in it: Spain, Portugal, Andorra, as well as a part of France and the British Overseas Territory of Gibraltar.
Geography.
It is the westernmost of the 3 major southern European peninsulas, the Iberian, Italian, and Balkan. It is bordered on the southeast and east by the Mediterranean Sea, and on the north, west, and southwest by the Atlantic Ocean. The Pyrenees form the northeast edge of the peninsula, separating it from the rest of Europe. Its southern tip is very close to the northwest coast of Africa, separated from it by the Strait of Gibraltar.
Name. Greek name.
The English word Iberia was adapted from the use of the ancient Greek word Iberia, Iberia, by the Greek geographers under the Roman Empire to refer to what is known today in English as the Iberian Peninsula. At that time, the name did not describe a single political entity or a distinct population of people. Strabo's Iberia was delineated from Celtic by the Pyrenees and included the entire landmass southwest. He named it west of there. The ancient Greeks discovered the Iberian Peninsula by voyaging westward. Hecataeus of Miletus was the first known to use the term around 500 BC. Herodotus of Halicarnassus says of the Phocaeans that it was they who made the Greeks acquainted with Iberia. According to Strabo, prior historians used Iberia to mean the country this side of the Iberos, Iberos, as far north as the River Rhone in France, but currently they set the Pyrenees as the limit. Polybius respects that limit, but identifies Iberia as the Mediterranean side as far south as Gibraltar, with the Atlantic side having no name. Elsewhere he says that Saguntum is on the seaward foot of the range of hills connecting Iberia and Celtiberia. Strabo refers to the Caritanians as people of the Iberian stock living in the Pyrenees, who are to be distinguished from either Celts or Celtiberians.
Roman names.
When the Romans encountered the Greek geographers, they used Iberia poetically and spoke of the Iberi. The first mention was by the poet Quintus Ennius in 200 BC. The Romans had already had independent experience with the peoples on the peninsula during the long conflict with Carthage. The Roman geographers and other prose writers from the time of the late Roman Republic called the entire peninsula Hispania. As they became politically interested in the former Carthaginian territories, the Romans came to use Hispania Citeria and Hispania Ulteria for near and far Spain. Even at the time large sections of it were Lusitania, Portugal south of Douro River and Extremadura in western Spain, Galicia, northern Portugal and Galicia in Spain, Celtiberia, central Spain, Baetica, Andalusia, Cantabria, northwest Spain, and the Vascons, Basques. Strabo says that the Romans use Hispania and Iberia synonymously, and distance them as near and far. He was living in a time when the peninsula was divided into Roman provinces, of which Bisha was supervised by the Senate, whereas the others were governed on behalf of the emperor. Except for Basque, which protected by the Pyrenees, whatever language may have been spoken on the peninsula soon gave way to Latin.
Etymology.
The Iberian Peninsula has always been associated with the Bro River, Iberus in ancient Greek and Iberus or Hebrus in Latin. The association was so well known it was hardly necessary to state. For example, Iberia was the country this side of the Iberus in Strabo. Pliny goes so far as to assert that the Greeks had called the whole of Spain Iberia because of the Hebrus River. The river appears in the Bro Treaty of 226 BC between Rome and Carthage, setting the limit of Carthaginian interest at the Bro. The fullest description of the treaty, stated in Appian, uses Iberus. With reference to this border, Polybius states that the native name is Iber, apparently the original word, stripped of its Greek or Latin os or us termination. The early range of these natives, stated by the geographers and historians to be from southern Spain to southern France along the Mediterranean coast, is marked by instances of a readable script expressing a yet unknown language, dubbed Iberian. Whether this was the native name or was given to them by the Greeks for their residence on the Bro remains unknown. Credence in Polybius imposes certain limitations on etymologizing. If the language remains unknown, the meanings of the words, including Iber, must also remain unknown. In modern Basque, the word Iber means valley or watered meadow, while Ibai means river, but there is no proof relating the etymology of the Bro River with these Basque names.
Prehistory. Paleolithic.
The Iberian Peninsula has been inhabited for at least 1 million years, as remains found in the sites at Atapuerca demonstrate. Among these sites is the cave of Grande Elena, where 6 hominin skeletons, dated between 780,000 and 1 million years ago, were found in 1994. Experts have debated whether these skeletons belong to the species Homo erectus, Homo heidelbergensis, or a new species called Homo antecessor. Around 200,000 BC, during the Lower Paleolithic period, Neanderthals first entered the Iberian Peninsula. Around 70,000 BC, during the Middle Paleolithic period, the last ice age began and the Neanderthal Mysterian culture was established. Around 35,000 BC, during the Upper Paleolithic, the Neanderthal Châtelperronian cultural period began. Emanating from southern France, this culture extended into the north of the peninsula. It continued to exist until around 28,000 BC, when Neanderthal man faced extinction. At about the 40th millennium BC, modern humans entered the Iberian Peninsula from southern France. Here, this genetically homogeneous population, characterized by the M173 mutation in the Y chromosome, developed the M343 mutation, giving rise to the O1b haplogroup, still the most common in modern Portuguese and Spanish males. On the Iberian Peninsula, modern humans developed a series of different cultures, such as the Aurignacian, Gravettian, Solatraean and Magdalenian cultures, some of them characterized by complex forms of Paleolithic art.
Neolithic.
During the Neolithic expansion, various megalithic cultures developed in the Iberian Peninsula. An open seas navigation culture from the East Mediterranean, called the Cardium culture, also extended its influence to the eastern coasts of the peninsula, possibly as early as the 5th millennium BC. These people may have had some relation to the subsequent development of the Iberian civilization.
Chalcolithic.
In the Chalcolithic or Copper Age, c. 3000 BC, a series of complex cultures developed that would give rise to the peninsula's first civilizations and to extensive exchange networks reaching to the Baltic, Middle East and North Africa. Around 2800–2700 BC, the Bell-Beaker culture, which produced the maritime Bell-Beaker, probably originated in the vibrant copper, using communities of the Tagus estuary in Portugal and spread from there to many parts of Western Europe.
Bronze Age.
Bronze Age cultures developed beginning c. 1800 BC, when the civilization of Los Millers was followed by that of El Aga. From this center, bronze technology spread to other areas, such as those of the Bronze of Levante, southwestern Iberian Bronze and Cogatus I. In the Late Bronze Age, the urban civilization of Tartessos developed in the area of modern western Andalusia, characterized by Phoenician influence and using the Tartessian script for its Tartessian language, not related to the Iberian language. Early in the first millennium BC, several waves of pre-Celts and Celts migrated from Central Europe, thus partially changing the peninsula's ethnic landscape into Indo-European space in its northern and western regions. In northwestern Iberia, northern Portugal, Asturias and Galicia, a Celtic culture developed, the Castro culture, with a large number of hill forts and some fortified cities.
Protohistory.
By the Iron Age, starting in the 7th century BC, the Iberian Peninsula consisted of complex agrarian and urban civilizations either pre-Celtic or Celtic, such as the Lusitanians, Celtiberians, Galaci, Astur, Celtici and others, the cultures of the Iberians in the eastern and southern zones and the cultures of the Aquitanian in the western portion of the Pyrenees. The seafaring Phoenicians, Greeks and Carthaginians successively settled along the Mediterranean coast and founded trading colonies there over a period of several centuries. Around 1100 BC, Phoenician merchants founded the trading colony of Gadir or Gads, modern-day Cadiz, near Tartessos. In the 8th century BC, the first Greek colonies, such as Emporion, modern Empuras, were founded along the Mediterranean coast on the east, leaving the south coast to the Phoenicians. The Greeks coined the name Iberia, after the river Iber, Bro. In the 6th century BC, the Carthaginians arrived in the peninsula while struggling with the Greeks for control of the western Mediterranean. Their most important colony was Cartagena Nova, Latin name of modern-day Cartagena.
History. Roman rule.
In 218 BC, during the Second Punic War against the Carthaginians, the first Roman troops invaded the Iberian Peninsula and annexed it under Augustus after 2 centuries of war with the Celtic and Iberian tribes and the Phoenician, Greek and Carthaginian colonies, resulting in the creation of the province of Hispania. It was divided into Hispania Ulteria and Hispania Citeria during the late Roman Republic, and during the Roman Empire, it was divided into Hispania Tarraconensis in the northeast, Hispania Baetica in the south and Lusitania in the southwest. Hispania supplied the Roman Empire with food, olive oil, wine, and metal. The emperors Trajan, Hadrian, and Theodosius I, the philosopher Seneca, and the poets Martial and Lucan were born from families living on the peninsula.
Germanic kingdoms.
In the early 5th century, Germanic tribes invaded the peninsula, namely the Suebi, the Vandals, Silingi and Horstingi, and their allies, the Sarmatian Alans. Only the kingdom of the Suebi, Quadi and Marcomanni, would endure after the arrival of another wave of Germanic invaders, the Visigoths, who conquered all of the Iberian Peninsula and expelled or partially integrated the Vandals and the Alans. The Visigoths eventually conquered the Suebi kingdom and its capital city Bracara, modern-day Braga, in 584 to 585. They would also conquer the province of the Byzantine Empire, 552 to 624, of Spania in the south of the peninsula and the Balearic Islands.
Islamic rule.
In AD 711, a Muslim army invaded the Visigothic kingdom in Hispania. Under Tariq ibn Ziyad, the Islamic army landed at Gibraltar and brought most of the Iberian Peninsula under Islamic control in an 8-year campaign. Al-Andalus, Arabic L&Dls, possibly land of the Vandals, is the Arabic name given the Iberian Peninsula by its Muslim Berber and Arab conquerors. From the 8th–15th centuries, the Iberian Peninsula was incorporated into the Islamic world and became a center of culture and learning, especially during the Caliphate of Córdoba, which reached its height under the rule of Abd ar-Rahman III. The Muslims, which were initially Arabs and Berbers, included local Iberian converts, the so-called Muladi, who formed the majority of the Iberian population by the year 1100. The Muslims were referred to by the generic name, Moors. Thus, before the so-called Reconquista gained momentum, the Iberian Peninsula had been transformed from a mainly Romance-speaking Christian land into a mainly Arabic-speaking Muslim land. However, pockets of Arabic and Romance-speaking Christians called Mozarabs survived throughout Al-Andalus, in addition to a large minority of Arabic-speaking Jews.
Reconquest.
Many of the ousted Gothic nobles took refuge in the unconquered North Asturian highlands. From there, they aimed to reconquer their lands from the Moors. This war of reconquest is known as the Reconquista. Christian and Muslim kingdoms fought and allied among themselves. The Muslim Taifa kings competed in patronage of the arts, the way of St. James attracted pilgrims from all Western Europe, and the Jewish population set the basis of Sephardic culture. During the Middle Ages, the peninsula housed many small states including Castile, Aragon, Navarre, Leon and Portugal. The peninsula was part of the Islamic Almohad Empire until they were finally uprooted. The last major Muslim stronghold was Granada, which was conquered by a combined Castilian and Aragonese force in 1492. Muslims and Jews throughout the period were variously tolerated or shown intolerance in different Christian kingdoms. However, after the conquest of Granada, all Muslims and Jews were ordered to convert to Christianity or face expulsion. Many Jews and Muslims fled to North Africa and the Ottoman Empire, while others publicly converted to Christianity and became known respectively as Morenos and Moriscos. However, many of these continued to practice their religion in secret. The Moriscos revolted several times and were ultimately forcibly expelled from Spain in the early 17th century.
Post-Reconquest.
The small states gradually amalgamated over time, with the exception of Portugal, even if for a brief period, 1580 to 1640, the whole peninsula was united politically under the Iberian Union. After that point, the modern position was reached and the peninsula now consists of the countries of Spain and Portugal, excluding their islands, the Portuguese Azores and Madeira Islands and the Spanish Canary Islands and Balearic Islands, and the Spanish exclaves of Ceuta and Melilla, Andorra, French Sudan and Gibraltar.
Geography and Geology. Overall characteristics.
The Iberian Peninsula extends from the southernmost extremity at Punta de Tarifa, 36-0015 N 5-3637 W/36.00417 DEG N 5.61028 DEG W/36.00417. -5.61028 to the northernmost extremity at Estaca de Bears Point, 43-4738 N7-4117 W/43.79389 DEG N7.68806 DEG W/43.79389. -7.68806 over a distance between lines of latitude of about 865 kilometers, 537 miles, based on a degree length of 111 kilometers, 69 miles, per degree, and from the westernmost extremity at Cabo da Roca, 38-4651 N9-2954 W/38.78083 DEG N9.49833 DEG W/38.78083. -9.49833 to the easternmost extremity at Cap de Creus, 42-1909 N3-1919 East/42.31917 DEG N3.32194 DEG East/42.31917. 3.32194 over a distance between lines of longitude at 40 deg N latitude of about 1,155 kilometers, 718 miles, based on an estimated degree length of about 90 kilometers, 56 miles, for that latitude. The irregular, roughly octagonal shape of the peninsula contained within this spherical quadrangle was compared to an ox hide by the geographer Strabo. About three-quarters of that rough octagon is the Meseta Central, a vast plateau ranging from 610 to 760 m in altitude. It is located approximately in the center, staggered slightly to the east and tilted slightly toward the west. The conventional center of the Iberian Peninsula has long been considered to be Getafe just south of Madrid. It is ringed by mountains and contains the sources of most of the rivers, which find their way through gaps in the mountain barriers on all sides.
Coastline.
The coastline of the Iberian Peninsula is 3,313 kilometers, 2,059 miles, 1,660 kilometers, 1,030 miles, on the Mediterranean side and 1,653 kilometers, 1,027 miles, on the Atlantic side. The coast has been inundated over time, with sea levels having risen from a minimum of 115 to 120 m, 377 to 394 feet, lower than today at the last glacial maximum, LGM, to its current level at 4,000 years BP. The coastal shelf created by sedimentation during that time remains below the surface. However, it was never very extensive on the Atlantic side, as the continental shelf drops rather steeply into the depths. An estimated 700 kilometers, 430 miles, length of Atlantic shelf is only 10 to 65 kilometers, 6.2 to 40.4 miles, wide. At the 500 m, 1,600 feet, isobath, on the edge, the shelf drops off to 1,000 m, 3,300 feet. The submarine topography of the coastal waters of the Iberian Peninsula has been studied extensively in the process of drilling for oil. Ultimately, the shelf drops into the Bay of Biscay on the north, an abyss, the Iberian Abyssal Plain at 4,800 m, 15,700 feet, on the west, and Tagus Abyssal Plain to the south. In the north, between the continental shelf and the abyss, is an extension, the Glisser Bank, a plateau also containing the Porto, Vigo and Vasco da Gama seamounts, creating the Galicia Interior Basin. The southern border of these features is marked by the Nazar Canyon, splitting the continental shelf and leading directly into the abyss.
Rivers.
The major rivers flow through the wide valleys between the mountain systems. These are the Bro, Douro, Tagus, Guadiana and Guadalquivir. All rivers in the Iberian Peninsula are subject to seasonal variations in flow. The Tagus is the longest river in the peninsula and, like the Douro, flows westwards with its lower course in Portugal. The Guadiana bends southwards and forms the border between Spain and Portugal in the last stretch of its course.
Mountains.
The terrain of the Iberian Peninsula is largely mountainous. The major mountain systems are the Pyrenees and their foothills, the Pre-Pyrenees, crossing the isthmus of the peninsula so completely as to allow no passage except by mountain road, trail, coastal road or tunnel. Aneto in the Maladetta Massif, at 3,404 m, is the highest point. The Cantabrian Mountains along the northern coast with the massive Picos de Europa. Tor de Cerrado, at 2,648 m, is the highest point. The Galicia Trás-os Montes Massif in the northwest is made up of very old heavily eroded rocks. Penetrivinca, at 2,127 m, is the highest point. The Sistema Iberico, a complex system at the heart of the peninsula, in its central eastern region. It contains a great number of ranges and divides the watershed of the Tagus, Douro and Bro rivers. Moncayo, at 2,313 m, is the highest point. The Sistema Central, dividing the Iberian Plateau into a northern and a southern half and stretching into Portugal, where the highest point of Portugal, 1,993 m, is located in the Serra da Estrela. Pico Amanza in the Sierra de Gredos is the highest point, at 2,592 m. The Montes de Toledo, which also stretches into Portugal from the La Mancha natural region at the eastern end. Its highest point, at 1,603 m, is La Villuica in the Sierra de Villacas, Extremadura. The Sierra Morena, which divides the watershed of the Guadiana and Guadalquivir rivers. At 1,332 m, Bornuela is the highest point. The Beatix system, which stretches between Cadiz and Gibraltar and northeast towards Alicante province. It is divided into three subsystems. Beatix system, which begins west of the Sierra Sur Dijon, reaching the Mediterranean sea shores in Alicante province. La Sagra is the highest point at 2,382 m. Sub-Beatix system, which is in a central position within the Beatix systems, stretching from Cape Trafalgar in Cadiz province across Andalusia to the region of Murcia. The highest point, at 2,027 m, 6,650 feet, is in Sierra Arana. Beatix system, located in the far southeastern area stretching between Gibraltar across the Mediterranean coastal Andalusian provinces. It includes the highest point in the peninsula, the 3,478 m high Mullicen in the Sierra Nevada. Beatix system, which begins west of the Sierra Sur Dijon, reaching the Mediterranean sea shores in Alicante province. La Sagra is the highest point at 2,382 m. Sub-Beatix system, which is in a central position within the Beatix systems, stretching from Cape Trafalgar in Cadiz province across Andalusia to the region of Murcia. The highest point, at 2,027 m, 6,650 feet, is in Sierra Arana, Penabetics system, located in the far southeastern area stretching between Gibraltar across the Mediterranean coastal Andalusian provinces. It includes the highest point in the peninsula, the 3,478 m high Mullisan in the Sierra Nevada.
Geology.
The Iberian Peninsula contains rocks of every geological period from the Ediaca into the recent, and almost every kind of rock is represented. World-class mineral deposits can also be found there. The core of the Iberian Peninsula consists of a Hercynian cratonic block known as the Iberian Massif. On the northeast, this is bounded by the Pyrenean Fold Belt, and on the southeast it is bounded by the Betic Fold Chain. These two fold chains are part of the Alpine Belt. To the west, the peninsula is delimited by the continental boundary formed by the magma pore opening of the Atlantic Ocean. The Hercynian Fold Belt is mostly buried by Mesozoic and Tertiary cover rocks to the east, but nevertheless outcrops through the Iberian Chain and the Catalan coastal ranges.
Modern countries and territories.
Political divisions of the Iberian Peninsula sorted by area.
Urbanization. Major cities.
Various other notable cities are also present on the peninsula, like Ilk, 230,354, Oviedo, 225,973, Badalona, 220,977 and Terrassa, 215,678, in Spain. And Braga, 181,874, Imadra, 175,558, Coimbra, 102,455 and Setúbal, 90,640 in Portugal.
Major metropolitan areas.
The main metropolitan areas of the Iberian Peninsula are Madrid, Barcelona, Lisbon, Valencia, Porto, Seville, Bilbao, Malaga, Central Asturias, Gijón, Oviedo, Avilés, Alicante, Ilk, Murcia, Braga and Coimbra.
Ecology. Forests.
The woodlands of the Iberian Peninsula are distinct ecosystems. Although the various regions are each characterized by distinct vegetation, there are some similarities across the peninsula. While the borders between these regions are not clearly defined, there is a mutual influence that makes it very hard to establish boundaries, and some species find their optimal habitat in the intermediate areas.
East Atlantic Flyway.
The Iberian Peninsula is an important stopover on the East Atlantic Flyway for birds migrating from northern Europe to Africa. For example, curlew sandpipers rest in the region of Cadiz Bay. In addition to the birds migrating through, some 7 million wading birds from the north spend the winter in the estuaries and wetlands of the Iberian Peninsula, mainly at locations on the Atlantic coast. In Galicia are Rio de Arousa, a home of grey plover, Rio de Ortigueira, Rio de Corme and Rio de Lakes. In Portugal, the Aveiro Lagoon hosts Recurvirostra abaceta, ringed plover, grey plover and little stint. Ribatejo province on the Tagus River supports Recurvirostra araceta, grey plover, dunlin, bar-tailed godwit and common red shank. In the Sado estuary are dunlin, Eurasian curlew, grey plover and common red shank. The Algarve hosts red knot, grenshank and turnstone. The Marismas de Guadalquivir region of Andalusia and the Salinas de Cadiz are especially rich in wintering wading birds, Kentish plover, ringed plover, sandling, and black-tailed godwit in addition to the others. And finally, the Bro Delta is home to all the species mentioned above.
Languages.
Except for Basque, which is of unknown origin, most modern Iberian languages descend from Vulgar Latin. Throughout history, and prehistory, many different languages have been spoken in the Iberian Peninsula, contributing to the formation and differentiation of the contemporaneous languages of Iberia. However, most of them have become extinct or fallen into disuse. Basque is the only non-Indo-European surviving language in Iberia and Western Europe. In modern times, Spanish, cf 30 to 40 million speakers, Portuguese, cf around 10 million speakers, Catalan, cf around 9 million speakers, Galician, cf around 3 million speakers, and Basque, cf around 500,000 speakers, are the most widely spoken languages in the Iberian Peninsula. Spanish and Portuguese have expanded beyond Iberia to the rest of the world, becoming global languages.